Esselamu Aleyküm ve Rahmetullah. Euzu billahi mineşşeytanirracim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Rabbi şrah li sadri ve yessir li emri vahlul ukdeten min lisani yefkahu kavli ve ceal li veziran min ehli Harun ahi ustud bihi ezri ve yeşriku fi emri key nusebbihake kesira ve nezkurake kesira inneke kunte bina basira. Allahümme allimna ma yenfa'una ve enfa'na bima allamtena ve zidna ilma ve erinel hakka hakkan ve erzukna ittiba'ah ve erinel batile batilen ve erzukna ijtinabe. La havle ve la kuvvete illa billahil aliyyil azim ve sallallahumma ala Muhammedin ve ala alihi ve ashabihi ve etba'ihi ve sellem. ربنا اغفر لنا وارحمنا وأنت خير الراحمين آمين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Sahabelerin companions, addendum to the 17th word, on the companions of the Prophet, and the subject was, as far as I remember, because I'm not the moderator, but just today replacing our moderator. He is not able to join today, unfortunately. He let me know before. So the degree, the general virtue of the companions cannot be reached. And this is a big claim, especially by the Sunni tradition. No one can reach the virtue of the companion, but this is the general virtue of the companion, as we are seeing that the text bolded it. This general virtue of the companions cannot be reached, and Allah in the Quran and the Prophet subject of praised them in Surah Fatih. So is it here? No. The verse is here. Muhammad is the messenger of God. That is the verse from section Fatih, 48th section of the Quran, verse number 29. Muhammad is the messenger of God, and those who are with him are strong against the unbelievers, but compassionate among each other. It means those who are with him, the companions of the Prophet, is praised here by God. That is what Quran says, but also we are going to see if this news of the Quran is satisfactory and we can confirm it. We will see. So the question was asked how the Quran or you say that the virtue of the general virtue of the Quran cannot be reached. And then the first instance of the wisdom is discussed, and we talked about it last week. And today we are going to read the second reason. This small reminder. This text that we are reading, all the text, in fact, is on the independent judgment, ijtihad, must be read not only to understand that what is ijtihad and in which case the ijtihad is valid and what is expected from the result of making judgments about practical matters. One aspect of it is this, but another aspect of the section that we are reading here, to understand the conditions that we are living now and see where we are and what is expected from us within the conditions of our time. Take the example previously and leave it by the prophet and his companions, and later on scholars worked on it, and they sometimes agreed, they sometimes disagreed, but we cannot do the same thing nowadays because the conditions of our time do not permit this. That is what we have to understand. While we are understanding why this matter, this ijtihad matter, independent judgment matter, should not be brought forward in today's living conditions, we have to pay attention. This is not only the matter of discussing the practical side of the teachings of Islam, but also understanding the conditions that we are living now. So we have to understand what we are going to do today, what is expected of us. So the second reason, let's read the second reason for this purpose. Now, would anybody like to read the text, the second reason? So maybe half of the paragraph, and then we will do the other half, not to lose the trace. Fariha, would you like to read it?
Okay, inshallah. Last. Second reason, as is explained and proved in the discussion of interpretation of the law in the 27th word, the vast majority of the companions were at the highest level of human perfections. For at that time, in the mighty revolution of Islam, good and truth appeared in all their beauty, and evil and falsehood in all their ugliness, and they were felt physically. Such a difference was apparent between good and evil, and such a distance opened up between truth and falsehood that they drew as distant from one another as belief is from unbelief, and even hell is from paradise. The companions who by nature possessed elevated emotions were captivated by the highest morality and inclined towards dignity and virtue, would not voluntarily stretch out their hands to evil and falsehood, and so fall to the level of Musaylima, the liar, and his ridiculous utterances. For he was the herald of falsehood, evil, and lies, and their embodiment. Their characters demanded that they look to the rank of the perfections, those of God's beloved, peace and blessings be upon him, at the highest of the high, who was the herald and embodiment of truthfulness, good and right, and that they hastened in that way with all their strength and endeavor.
What attracted your attention here? Anybody would like to share? What is the key words here that we will talk about it or around it? The difference between the time of the companions and now, and the significance of these differences.
So keywords here were good, evil, truth, falsehood, belief, unbelief, hell, paradise. It sounds to be synonymous, and I think the point being made here is that for the companions of the prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, at that time it was easier to distinguish between truth and falsehood. It was very obvious. Hence, belief and unbelief was easily distinguishable as well. Because nobody wanted to get into the road of falsehood. Just, I don't know, some person is mentioned here, Musaylima the liar. Nobody wanted to get that route because it was like an obvious physical example where you don't want to be inclined towards it.
So there was the truth and falsehood was really, as the text says, they were felt physically. For any person who has a good intention, were not possible to be on the false side if they wanted to follow the truth. But if one decides that they have to, they want to follow the falsehood, they would never accept the truth, because truth and falsehood were so distinguished between themselves, between them, so that either you are on the truth side or falsehood side. But of course, the person who follows one way, he will say, this is my truth. The point is not who is right, who is wrong. The point is two opposite understanding of existence, understanding of the value of life, understanding the purpose of life, were so clearly distinguished that time. Why? Because the already existing present, that time present understanding of world was we are dying here, and everybody will be proud of their tribe, and therefore they will be satisfied with this pride or virtue of their tribe, and afterwards they will die, and that's it. They finish. Some people tried to be a good person. Yes, that is very human. But for the sake of what? For the sake of fame, for the sake of gaining status, respect of the people, and also, egoistic satisfaction. But all of these were only until they die. Afterwards, they forget about the rest. And the prophet came up with the idea completely contradictory to all these values. Said, your tribal affiliation has nothing to do with your virtue. Your being famous in this society and having some people respectful to you have nothing to do with your virtue. These are other people. Your real virtue is, are you ready to return your existence, your life, your desires to your creator, so that after you die, your spirit will be treated accordingly in a permanent existence. The direction is diametrically contradictory to each other. So if someone says, I am going to concentrate or I am going to follow my worldly temporary pleasure, it was obvious that as long as this person decides that he will be running after his egotistic satisfaction in this world only, he would never accept the eternal life, the news of the eternal life existence. So clearly, physically observable, as if distinguished from each other. So if a person decides to follow the prophetic message, can you ever, or can anybody, or can I ever imagine that this person will be like Musaylima, denying the reality of the hereafter, the message of the prophet? I mean, they will hate to be in this position. It was clearly distinguishable, presented in front of their eyes. Of course, we shouldn't have the understanding that Allah favored them. I don't think so. If I am imagining myself. I am in this society, which is called Mecca, 1450 years ago. And I have been living in certain culture, in certain custom, and the whole society is united in the values of this culture, this civilization of the area. And somebody comes and presents to me completely contradictory to what I have been doing for years, it will be very hard to decide to turn your back to this previous experience, accustomed way of life, and take completely opposite direction, so that your life will be in danger as well. It is a big problem to me. How can I decide that I will go against this culture and against the people I am accustomed to living with them? But once, if a person decides, that's what we should understand, what makes a companion. The condition is to believe in the message and be in the presence of the Prophet Muhammad. Being in the presence of the Muhammad, the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, is taught or dealt with in first instance of wisdom. That was last week's discussion. Today, now, taking the side of the prophetic message is going to be analyzed. Second reason. So being together with the Muhammad puts my life at risk. That's one. And it is hard to change one's habit. Think about ourselves now. If I am used to following a certain culture, to change it is extremely difficult for me. But if someone decides, it means he took every risk for his life, so decisive, that's why he could manage to decide that he is going to be on the prophetic message side. And after taking or making this resolution, this really strong decision, resolute decision, was there any way that this person may turn back? So obviously clear now. This is one way, the other one. That is why the text says falsehood and truth made it clear, physically visible, as if physically visible, experiential. These people needed this condition from wisdom point of view, wisdom of God point of view. Because this, if it was like today's conditions, we can play this way or another way because they are just mixed up with each other or very close to each other. You know, you can pretend in the street that you are not a Muslim. That's it. Even you say I am a Muslim doesn't really mean that there is a complete contradiction between your understanding of life or living conditions and value of life against their understanding. They say, that's another culture. That's all right. It is fun to have different cultures. Now we are diversified society, diverse society. Sorry. So it is good that to have different cultures, and it's good experience. They don't see the tension between denial of the message of the Quran and confirming the message of the Quran. That's why it is extremely important to notice that today we cannot play the role of the companions of the Prophet. That time they lived. It is easy now to just mix up, change the color. That time, the color was black and white. Now everywhere is really gray. So much that you cannot know whether it is black or not, white. So close to each other. While we are thinking of the conditions of the companions, we shouldn't confuse their position with our position. We have to think of their living conditions and understand that it is impossible to have this sincerity as they experienced after deciding to follow the prophetic message and being next to the prophet. I cannot imagine for myself to experience this because my living conditions. Here I am. I wear my Islamic dress identity. I mean, I cannot claim that this is an Islamic dress, but in this society, this is Islamic identity of the Muslims. I go up. I am an ordinary man. Still, no one says that, oh, this is my enemy. No, I am really being treated in this way. Some people, politically minded people, maybe in the Midwest, in this Central America, North America. So they may have some. Oh, no, I tried there as well. Even in Texas, I tried. Even in Texas, I deliberately just checked and prayed in the park openly. Put my sajjada in front of hundreds of people. No one took notice of me, really. They said in Texas, you may be attacked or something. No, not at all. I experienced that. I did this. I went to Texas and experienced it. No one takes it. Another culture. So it is not as challenging as the companions' decisions were. No, we have to understand that. What is the benefit of knowing this? We are in a culture that falsehood and truth is mixed up. So how can I make sure where I am, on which side I am taking? I can play around with it. No, in my house, I pray. When I go out, I am an ordinary American citizen. And even if I pray in the street, which I do, will take my car aside and everywhere on the road, in the city, in Manhattan. How many times I prayed in Manhattan openly in front of everybody on the appropriate place, of course, not harming people's way, but on the sidewalks, I prayed many times. I've never seen any eyes looking at me in a strange way. So I cannot really be like the companions in the companions of the position. That's one. That's one thing. Another thing is now they would never ever voluntarily stretch out their hands to evil and falsehood. Why? An idea. This is also extremely important point here in this paragraph. They would never, yes, would never also should be included in red. Yep. What does it mean? Would you like to share your understanding? They would never voluntarily stretch out their hands to evil and falsehood. I think it goes along with the previous one. This physically they are experiencing it. But voluntarily, by mistake or fallibilities with human beings. But by mistake, they would never voluntarily stretch out their hands to evil and falsehood voluntarily. Involuntarily is different. That is human condition. So we have to understand that we voluntarily can play the role of ordinary American citizen. Ordinary American citizen. We can do that. I do that. I do that. But they would never do that because in the society where they were living, especially in Meccan life, during the Prophet's Meccan life, and early Medina life, Medinian life, or however you call it, Medina life. Early 1, 2, 3, after everything became settled down, every time there was war and conflict between the falsehood and truth, physically also wars were taking place. It was very difficult, really, after deciding to take side by the prophetic message, for a person to tell a lie or to be in between. Somehow hypocrisy is different. But sincere believers, to be in between, sometimes like them, sometimes like the prophetic teaching requires them to be, it was almost impossible. That is why we cannot really reach out the let's say trustworthiness, solidarity, consistency as the companions showed, especially the companions in Mecca, which are called the immigrants when they moved to Medina, and early 3, 4, 5 years of Medina life. But later on, it doesn't mean that they are not companions, but later on, the community really became hundreds of thousands of people. So it was easy to relinquish their identity in the society. In Mecca, in the early 4 or 5 years of Medina, everybody knew that this is a Muslim following the Prophet's message, and this is not. Again, clear. Later on, new people came and joined, and you don't know because he just recently joined the community. They were not really accustomed with Islamic way of life. They were in the course of learning Islam, so they may be really shaking between this way or another way because they are in the process of perfection. So, in general, we can say the companions of the prophets cannot be reached out. Now, let's read this one. If you don't, if you have anything to share with us, please go ahead. Otherwise, I will re-emphasize this section. Okay. Their characters demanded that they look to the rank of the perfections. The characters demanded. Why? Because their decision shaped their characters. If someone changes his decision, especially about the general way of living, the character changes. So the character demanded that they look to the rank of the perfections. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to make the decision that they are going to turn their back to their years of experience of certain way of life, customary life, and take the opposite direction. Those of God's beloved Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, at the highest of the high, who was the herald and embodiment of truthfulness. So together, of course, supported by miracles as well, created by God. So they were 100% sure that Prophet is not acting on his demand, on his whims, according to his personal understanding and ideas as far as the religious subjects are concerned. So anything he says that this is the message must be correct. His character, the consistency of the message, and also appropriateness of the message to human nature, human reality, and also supported by miracles. So it was impossible to turn their back after confirming his way, deciding that they will be with the Prophet, going back and mixing up. It was impossible. So the embodiment of truthfulness, good and right, were on the side of the Prophet, and that they hastened in that way with all their strength and endeavor. That's why they were ready to die for the sake of protection of this message. They really believed that it was really true. If someone really believes something that it is really true, he is ready to devote their life. Whatever it is, not only Islam. For example, this famous historical event happened, this Hitler's SS army members. They really believed in Hitler's idea that the German nation is super. They were ready to die for it. They joined the war. They went into Russia, and quite a number of them were died there. Number of them died there because they really believed in it. It means they really believed in Hitler's theology or Hitler's understanding, not theology, theory. The German nation is the super nation. Exactly, we see the same thing on prophet, on the in the life of the companions during that time. They were ready to die and they joined. They really voluntarily wanted to join, and they were not afraid of being killed at all. It is martyred because this shows that they really believe in the message. So if someone believes in the message of the Quran, do you think this person can tell a lie or do something really bad against human nature? Impossible. That is why we have to trust the companions. It is important to trust the companions practically because anything narrated by the companions, and which is called hadith narrations, prophetic sayings and actions, the narrations of the prophetic saying, transmitted to us through companions. If the companions did not have these characteristics, we may doubt about the hadith narrations transmitted to us by them. That is also important. Now we have to trust the companions' narrations. And that is why this subject is very important. The independent judgment, ijtihad, mostly based on hadith narration, prophetic practices. That is why if you and I are practicing Islamic values in our personal lives and social lives, when it is referred to or necessitated, it is due to the hadith narrations. If I don't really believe in hadith narrations, that transmitted to me, transferred to me through companions, by having, or because I have some suspicion about the companions himself. But we have to be careful about this subject. Companions never tell lie. That is obvious that we are reading the reasons for it. But later generations, as the gap between truth and falsehood got closer to each other, political concerns involved in the matters, and later on, of course, the wars and conflict between certain groups, then people thinking that if I narrate something like this from the prophet, so my side will look better, smarter, and right. Some things happened in this way among the later generations. And the considerate people concentrated on it. Whether this person is saying something, can I trust him? No, because of the political tensions, partisanship, and also not being in the same position as the companions. And they traced this narration seriously, closely, diligently, until they were sure that this chain of narration reached the companions. And of course, all the companions had died until then. So if the narration chain securely connected to the companions, they didn't doubt anything about the truthfulness of the hadith narration anymore. That is how the hadith narrations are analyzed and scrutinized by the authorities. They wrote volumes of book about the life of each person who claimed a narration of a hadith. Who is this man? Where he lived? How he was known in the society? And his connection with the person who is narrating from is really possible, physically happened, investigated in great details. If there is a doubt, they put a question mark in the narration. But this is important because companions had died when this scholarship took serious place in the Islamic history of hadith scholars, hadith narrations. There were no companions. So if a person, if the expert finds that the narration chain reaches the companions, then they said, okay, I can trust this verse now, this narration now. If there is a doubt, according to the strength of the doubt, they categorize the hadith narrations, saying that is for sure, that is most likely correct. This one is a bit doubtful. This is no. We should keep it away. This is no. Cannot happen at all. This is called no, false fabrication. So they categorized it and they did a great job. The important matter, as I keep saying, that companions' trustworthiness is essential in hadith narration. And hadith narration's trustworthiness is essential to practice what the Prophet brought to us in his exemplary life. Did I make sense here?
So you said companions' trustworthiness is essential in hadith narrations.
Yeah.
And then I couldn't catch the other part.
No. Trustworthiness of companions is essential in hadith narration. Now, and hadith narration is essential in independent judgment, which means ijtihad. And ijtihad is essential for you and me to practice the heritage of the Prophet in my life. It means my practical side of religious experience practices depend on the trustworthiness of companion. So the chain goes this way. It is directly related to me, and I must be careful about these narrations. So because most of the things we are practically doing is narrated from prophetic practice. Quran doesn't mention the details. Quran says pray. What does it mean? Quran says fast. What does it mean? How can I do it? Quran says give zakat. What is that? Quran doesn't explain the details. In some cases it does. In some cases it does. Inheritance law, marriage law, and marriage status, and divorce, because divorce happens rarely, but it's a very serious subject. After sharing your life with someone, you just break it up. Maybe children are out there. What will happen to them? How am I going to organize my life afterwards? during divorce also, it is not an easy matter. It is not a simple matter at all. It is a very serious matter. You can imagine. You shared your life with someone, and now you are separating, and everybody goes his own way. And how about the children? After you get married, maybe you remarry again when there are other children as well. What am I going to do with them? How am I going to deal with them? These are detailed in the Quran, for sure. But prayer, God knows in his wisdom, prayer will be narrated from the prophet, commonly known by everybody throughout human history, which is the case. But in terms of other matters, now Quran wanted to, if you like, God wanted to make it somehow, not totally in details. No, main parts are described in the Quran. Whereas about fasting, about prayer, for example, about Hajj, zakat, are not great details at all. Just very general statements. Make glorification when sun sets or sun rises or in midday or this kind of thing. But what does it mean? Even the word salah is not used. Glorification, praising is used there. Because the prophetic tradition really, God's wisdom knows what will happen in the future, it is preserved. So our ubudiyya, practical ubudiyya, worship, and being in relationship with God in our practical physical life depends on hadith narrations. Otherwise, Islam would become like Christianity. There is no practice. So narration has been taken seriously by Jewish tradition. They still practice because they believe in narration as well. So they have their Talmud and rabbinic interpretations, narrations. They have lots of books about it, narrations, collecting the narrations. Thousands of pages. So they keep their practice. Christians have no narration, no practice. You see, they say, I am a Christian, but there's no practice in their life. Nothing. They do nothing. Go to church once, 1 hour a week, that's it. And their life is lived as a secular life. Not different from any secular person. This is why the companions, trustworthiness of companions, is extremely important for us now. We have to understand it. Shall we read one more paragraph, for example, in other examples?
I'm sure we can do that, but I just wanted to reiterate some points that were mentioned. I think they're very useful.
Yes.
To digest, because I mean we need the practical side of connecting with God and through hadith narrations, just like we say Quran is a speech of God, but the same thing, like how do I practice that, is through the hadith narrations, which cannot be questionable. That's also an important point because of the trustworthiness of the companions, who were very sincere and devoted to what the messenger of God, peace and blessings be upon him, is disseminating. So SubhanAllah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And what was the point about you were saying that some people did studies on questioning how authentic a narration is? So later on, after the hadith narrations that were directly transmitted to the companions of the Prophet, afterwards, when people tried to interpret that, that's where people
No.
started to look for the chain. I didn't quite get that.
No, not interpretation. Authenticity of the narration. Authenticity of the when hadith, the discipline, scholarship has been taken up very seriously by the hadith scholars was maybe 200 years later, 100 years later, although there were some documents, but serious critics are made about the authenticity of the hadith. And authenticity of the hadith started from the last ring of the chain. Last ring, leave it in, let's say 100, after Prophet Hijrah 100, 150, or around there, 100, around there. There were no companions. So people narrated from each other so that the chain of narration, I heard from this, I heard from this. If you read hadith narrations really with the chain, there's a long list there. I heard from him, he heard from this, he heard from this. And the last chain, the previous chain, they call it tabi'in and tabi'in, were scrutinized. If they were sure that the last ring of the chain and the chain before this were sure, the third one goes to companion. And companion is not questioned. Why? Because they trusted the companions. If they didn't trust the companions, there would be no religion for us. Now, religion is practical side. Only theoretical teachings of the Quran remains there. So they questioned the last ring of the chain, and the previous ring of the chain, until they reached the companion. They were sure that companions would never tell a lie at all, because companion narrates, says, I heard Prophet doing this. I saw Prophet doing this. But the later generation, they cannot speak in this way. They didn't hear from the Prophet. They didn't see the Prophet doing something, behaving in such a way. So they say, I heard from Abu Hurairah, I heard from Ibn Abbas, I heard from Anas bin Malik. Yeah, because he said, they say, he said, Prophet said this. Now, Anas bin Malik's narration from the Prophet is beyond doubt that it is true. But the one who narrates from Anas bin Malik is questioned and investigated. This person really was possible for this person to receive this message from Anas bin Malik? Let me investigate it. Now, they investigated the biography. One scholar I heard, I didn't read it, 60 volumes of book he wrote about the biography of the narrators of the hadith. These are not companions' life. But they are sure. There is no need to investigate whether Anas bin Malik has ever told lie. No. Enes bin Malik said this. Enes bin Malik and heard. He said, I heard from Muhammad saying this, doing this. That is sure. But afterwards, because he's companion, it means he was with the Prophet. He saw the Prophet. But somebody else, they said Zayd. Zayd said, I heard from Enes bin Malik. Where Enes bin Malik lived? In this place. What time? They said this time. They investigated all of them. And they came, they now investigated Zayd's life. Was he possible to see Enes bin Malik? Was he there as where Enes bin Malik was? They questioned it. And the time was synchronizing it. When did you hear it? Such and such time. Was he really there? Was Enes there as well? Was it likely that he spoke, he communicated with Enes bin Malik? All investigated. They are all thoroughly investigated. Unbelievable work they did. The Hadith critics. And they say, that is correct. Then they accept it. If there is a doubt about it, put a question mark. If it was not possible, they rejected it completely. The narration that this is fabrication. That's it. Even the person may have a good intention. They rejected it because it is impossible that he heard this news from Enes bin Malik. Historically fixed, historically proven. That is important. And the later generation, the third generation, afterwards, everything was settled down, written in the book form, and there was no doubt afterwards. There was no doubt afterwards. So some Hadith critics were very serious, like Bukhari and Muslim. Some others are not as much strict as they are. Among the Sunni tradition, Bukhari and Muslim, if Bukhari and Muslim narrates the same hadith, it means this is for sure. No doubt. Because they were so meticulous about the subject. If there was any sign, not sign really, smell of doubt, they didn't take it. So Bukhari and Muslim for sure, historically. But our subject is here. When Enes bin Malik narrated something from the Prophet, it is not subject to investigation whether this is true or not, because we understand the characteristics of the companions. Never ever tell lie. Impossible. That's what we are hearing. That's why we are reading this text here as an addendum to ijtihad subject. Is it clear?
Yeah, alhamdulillah, thank you. So it's all about the authenticity of the narration. And I'm just wondering, like, when you're tracing down the chain, like, why would somebody fabricate a narration? I mean, isn't,
No,
I'm just
they
wondering.
know. They know, because when they say, I heard this, Enes bin Malik said so, but is it really physically possible and correct? And is he really telling a lie? There are other many narrations there. That's not only one narration. They say, I mean, in the field, in the area, they collected millions of narrations, but it is reduced to only a few thousand, 3,000. Any doubt, for example, if the narration has somehow contradictory to teachings of the Quran. That is for sure, forget about it. Somehow contradictory that it is not likely that a prophet, Muhammad والسلام, can say like this, because there is no other similar attitude or similar concepts are narrated from the prophet. They were so careful about it, so vigilant about it, so much. So if it is especially narrated by Bukhari and Muslim, there is no doubt. So fabrication, and also not only the physical evidence. So they investigated about the fame of the person in that society, whether he was a trustworthy man or not. For example, there is an expression in Hadith discipline, which is called da'if. Da'if means is weak. It means the narrator, one of the narrator in between companion and the one who writes the book, Hadith collections that we have now, which are called Sunan. So these Sunan books. So in these books, if a person is somehow Hadith authorities got some idea that he is not a very trusty person. From others' narrations, from other narrations, they investigated it. They just left it aside. And I have read many, many hadiths saying that no, in the chain goes to the companion. There is somebody, one, he is not regarded as a trusted person among the other Muslims. That's it. He was very politically oriented. He was very partisan. They discovered that they are not only looking for physical conditions, but physical conditions is first, and then characters of the person. I read a lot hadith narrations saying that this person is not known as a trustworthy person by other Muslims, so we take this hadith with suspicion. No, they were much, much clever. They were really expert on the subject. And that the most seriously studied subject in Islamic history is hadith narration. The tafsir is not that much serious. Later on, generations concentrated on the details of the rhetorics of the Quran, Balagha, it is called, rhetorics of the Quran. Later on generations, the first generations were not that detailed. But hadith narrations were really closely scrutinized by the scholars, many of them investigated, wrote about them, recorded their life stories. Almost all of the names mentioned in the narration, hadith narrations, are examined, and biography of these people have been written. All of them. The biography of hadith narrators, these are the books that we are not even aware of their existence. The subject is seriously taken. And also, sometimes I complain. The scholars concentrated on hadith narrations and neglected Quran. But somehow it was needed. Later on, later generation, Quran commentators developed, but later on, first hadith narrations, were taken seriously because they understood that if we don't trust hadith, we cannot have our practical worship life.
SubhanAllah, this is very eye-opening, actually.
I
The
think
whole,
we should be aware of it.
inshallah.
It is not a simple subject. Somebody says this hadith is weak. The other one says this hadith is only it's coming from one line. I mean, the minimum requirement for a hadith narration to be taken seriously must be united by 3 different narration lines, supported. Different people are saying the same thing. I heard from Enes bin Malik or Aisha or Abdullah ibn Abbas, Abdullah ibn Abbas, or Ömer, Abdullah ibn Ömer, Abdullah ibn Mesud, and especially Abu Hurayra, Ibn Abbas, Abdullah ibn Abbas. These names are very much mentioned because they taught people. Ibn Abbas had a school teaching people. It is very famous. So his students narrate from him, and everybody knows who his students were by the other scholars. So they cannot really tell a lie because they know who were there. So if there are 3 different lines supporting each other that this hadith, for example, narrated through Enes bin Malik, supports each other, 3 different lines, not only one line of chain. Then they took it seriously. If it is less than 3, they call it hadith ahad. It means 1 chain or 2 chains. It means be careful about it. After 7 line of narrations, narrate the same hadith from the same source of the companion, then this is accepted, definitely trustworthy. That's what Bukhari and Muslim followed. But 7 different lines of chain says the same word from the same source companion. I think it is clear now. The companion's narration from the Prophet is unquestioned. That is why we are reading this text. Why it is not unquestioned? Because they cannot tell a lie. Being on the side of Prophet and telling a lie, impossible. But for me, I can do it now. And next week we are going to read why you cannot trust me now. For example, we are not going to read it, just a starting point for the next week. For example, it sometimes happens that in the market of human civilization, a shop of society in this age, everyone flees in disgust from the result of ugly consequence of that time, sorry. Now, we have to leave it for the next week. All right, inshallah. Our moderator will deal with it, inshallah. Shall we stop? Any more concern and question?
Alhamdulillah, we can stop, inshallah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين بحرمة سر سورة الفاتحة.